Hello everyone. I am Alice of KHR Arts and Cloud Orchid Publishing, and today I'm going to talk to y'all about my experience at RaptorCon. So this is a convention that Neal and I have never been to before, as well as a location that we haven't been to an event at before, Evansville, Indiana. It was nearly a 6-hour drive to get there, and there was so much preparation that went into this convention. And right off the bat, I am going to say, unfortunately, it was a big disappointment. So let's get into the nitty-gritty of it. As you can see, we packed so much stuff for this convention because we're at the point now where we are getting full-sized booths at the events that we go to, unless it's one of the small events like a library event or one of those location events, kind of like Pancakes and Booze, as well as our upcoming event at the Miskatonic Art Bazaar. Those where you're only allowed to have a singular table, we make do, but when it comes to actual weekend events and conventions, we get an honest-to-goodness full booth space. Unfortunately, this event, the booth space was a little bit smaller than we had anticipated. We've been trying to make sure that we do events where we can have a 10-foot by 10-foot booth space, as this seems to be our sweet spot right now with all of my stuff and with all of Neal's stuff. This one was only 8 by 6, but we made do. It was a little cramped, but we were able to display everything. We just had to get a little creative with the setup. That in mind, it means that we still have a lot that we have to bring to the convention in order to fill the booth space properly. So this means bringing a lot of our own tables, bringing a lot of book racks, and then of course just all the little odds and ends that you need in order to make a booth space look nice. The tablecloths, the little knickknacks, and of course, so important, a thing that is easily overlooked is chairs. I learned my lesson with that with an event that I did back when I was starting out in 2018. Make sure that you bring a chair because venues don't always provide one, and the last thing you want to do is stand for an entire weekend. I had to do that once and it was miserable. Don't make that mistake. We also have to bring a lot of stuff because I'm also a professional cosplayer. This is a big part of my branding and it draws people to the booth. It's kind of hard to miss the big pink sparkly unicorn person, and it draws people in, and typically at events, it then encourages them to look at the books and makes us more likely to have sales. So, because of all that stuff that we have to bring to conventions now, at our last convention that we did, the Chicago Steampunk Expo, we realized that we have officially run out of space in my Jeep, which is a problem, especially with driving to a location that is nearly 6 hours away, when typically we had been doing events that are essentially in our backyard that are at most an hour away. We solved this problem with this awesome cargo system called the Rhino Rooftop Cargo Space. Highly recommend it. It is so sturdy, really well made. It served exactly what we needed. Unfortunately, I tried to plan ahead, y'all, and get everything that I needed, and because I just don't really know anything about cars, I accidentally entered in the wrong car type thing. I thought that I had a Jeep Compass. Apparently I have a Jeep Patriot. Apparently that matters. So when I tried to order the horizontal roof bars, they did not fit. And that was because it was the wrong car type. So the measurements were different, I guess. And I ended up having to return them, and there just wasn't enough time to order new ones because that involved me having to then go back to the drawing board, do research, blah, blah, blah. So that's going to be a project for me now between now and our next big event, which honestly isn't until 2025 anyway. So that gives us plenty of time to prepare. But what's so awesome about the Rhino cargo system, and I'll leave an affiliate link in the description below for y'all. And just a quick note, I do not have a sponsorship or any sort of brand deal or anything like that. I'm not sponsored by Rhino. This is just the product that happened to be the best according to my research and my budget, and I'm just telling y'all about my experience that I had with it, which is wholly positive, and sharing this information along with all of the other general information that I share to help y'all be better prepared for conventions, especially traveling conventions, is that you actually don't need roof racks in order to have this system on your car, and it fits on basically any car. We were able to secure it to the parallel bars that I already had on my car. They're standard to the Jeep, and it didn't go anywhere. We did do a test run before this. The last time that I visited Neal, we went out and we secured it to the roof with nothing in it, just in case, it flew off. We wanted to make sure it wasn't going to hit anybody or be a danger, and it did not move, y'all. It just stayed there. It was amazing. So I imagine that the horizontal bars will just take some of the weight off, as well as just distribute the weight a little bit better. But for the most part, it just stayed where it was. And y'all, we were so paranoid, looking up out of the window at it while we were driving there and back, just being like, oh my God, is it still there? Because it was just so secure that we didn't hear anything. We didn't hear any banging or anything. So we just kept being paranoid, oh my God, is it still up there? And it was. And it even has this really cool securing system that's optional, where you can peel back the, I think it's called the weather stripping stuff, the black rubber stuff around your doors, that you can pull that back a little bit and put these hooks directly on the metal of your car. I personally didn't want to do that with my Jeep because I do have the bars on top of my car, but that is an option for people that have a 4-door car where they don't have rails on top of their vehicle. That's another way that you can secure it. And the way that it secures is that you put everything in it, and then the straps go through these loops, so that when you tie it down, it goes over the zipper part. So you zip it all closed, and then the straps go over it, so that even if, let's just say, somehow it unzipped itself a little bit, the straps are over it, so it's not just going to fly open, which is just such good design. And the way that the fabric folds down over where the zipper goes, so that helps prevent any sort of wind or anything pulling on the zipper. It just was so secure. It made me feel so good about using the system. I've never done something like this before. Neal's never done something like this before with his car. Growing up, apparently his family would do the whole putting cargo on the roof thing, so he was a little more familiar and comfortable than me, but we were just overall so paranoid the whole time, and it worked like a dream. Unfortunately, there was a tiny little pinprick hole that did develop by the end of the trip, but a big part of that is because of the racks that we put in there. The display racks that we have for our books do have sharp edges, and I do think that because we stuffed it so full that pierced a side of it. But honestly, it's such an easy fix. I just have to make the time to sit down with needle and thread and fix it, literally the size of a pin. So tiny, 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 and that's because of a mistake on our part, but the fabric is so durable and it's waterproof, which was another thing I was paranoid about, was that I didn't want to put a bunch of stuff on our roof, and then if weather happens, that all of a sudden all of our stuff is all wet or ruined or whatever. So just all around really good system, really recommend it. It was only about $300, which in the grand scheme of things is not that expensive for a roof system. I saw some that were over $1,000, which I just don't have the money for something like that. So I highly recommend this system. It's a good middle ground where it's a little bit more pricey, but it's definitely worth the cost because it's not going to fall apart and it's super secure. So our goal with having the roof cargo system is that the tables and the book racks take up the most space in the car. They are the least modular things. They take up the most space, and they are the most annoying to deal with, especially the book racks, because they're bulky, they get caught on everything, they're just such a pain. And so being able to put several of the tables and the book racks up into the roof cargo system so that they just weren't in the car made such a big difference with our packing process. Unfortunately, because we have to just at this point bring so many tables and so many book racks, we could not fit all of them in the roof cargo system, but being able to put essentially like half on the roof made an enormous difference. as well as we wanted to make sure that we did put some of the tables on the roof along with the book racks, because the book racks are incredibly light. And again, we were worried about it flying off the roof or flying around in general. We wanted to make sure that we did have some weight in there to just kind of keep it onto the vehicle. So that's why we made that decision. And we were also able to just put some odds and ends up there to fill space, since again, the book racks are just so bulky and oddly shaped. It afforded empty spaces that we could just put some small stuff up there that we didn't need immediate access to, that we didn't have to worry about being too heavy or being fragile or anything like that, which again just made it so much easier for us to be able to better organize packing the vehicle overall. In the future, we do have plans to eventually get a trailer. And when I say a trailer, I don't mean like a giant RV or anything like that. I mean those, those small little U-Hauls that you have a trailer hitch and you put it on and it's like, I don't know, like 6 foot by 6 foot, something like that. Eventually, that's what we're going to have to go to because of just the size of the booth that we do now. 10 by 10 requires about 6 tables for us to properly fill the space. It takes about, I think it's 6 to 8 book racks, depending on how our setup is for the event. And then the chairs, all of that takes up a lot of space. And then of course, the books themselves take up a lot of space. The biggest change that I made this year to how we pack the car with the books is that I moved to this much easier system with putting the books in smaller boxes. So each box only has one type of book in them, which makes it way easier for us at the convention to be able to refill the book racks so that we're not digging through giant boxes trying to find the type of book we need all the way at the bottom. As well as, because I'm becoming more disabled, it is so much easier for me to lift and carry these boxes that are only about 5-10 pounds worth of books rather than the giant tubs that I had previously that were about 50 pounds each, and there were like 4 of them. And this is only going to keep going. Neal and I are just going to keep writing more books. So that means more boxes of books that we're going to have to pack in the car to take with us, which just means more space taken up by stuff. So eventually we are going to need a trailer in order to be able to just fit all of that. And then of course, just all of my cosplay stuff, all of Neal's clothes and toiletries and all of that, just all of that, like you would be surprised, y'all, how fast all of that takes up room in the car. And we did end up having to reconsolidate a few things and leave a few small things behind just to make everything fit, because as you can see on the lawn, we also had both of our carts. Those also take up a lot of space and they're heavy, but highly recommend, like 100%, y'all. I know I harp on this in every video, but if you are doing events and conventions, get a cart. It is life-changing. You don't have to lug heavy stuff. You can just throw it in the cart. It just makes it so much easier. Trust me, dealing with the logistics of stairs is a walk in the park compared to having to deal with the logistics of making 8 million trips just carrying everything with your arms rather than just throwing it all in a cart. Best decision ever. Get a cart. So all of that took up just all of the space in the car, but we did make sure that the cabin in the front where Neal and I sit, that we didn't have stuff up there, because especially since it was such a long drive, we wanted to make sure it was comfortable, as well as it is a safety concern. You just don't want to overpack the front of the car because stuff could fly around if you have to stop suddenly. It's also dangerous in terms of just being able to see and things like that. But yeah, just do not pack stuff in the cabin of the car. The only thing that we had up there were our snacks and our water bottles and my purse. So yeah, make sure that you are being safe when packing your vehicle. We make sure that we're safe with packing the Jeep. We have bungee cords that we put across the back seat to make sure that everything stays back there, that it's not going to fly forward at us. Like even though it looks like absolute crazy pants when we pack, we do make sure that it's safe, and we do make sure that we don't overload it where like a window is going to break or anything like that. Like we are very strategic in how we pack the car. And that's also part of the reason why we packed the roof cargo space the way that we did, is we didn't want that to be too heavy and overload the car, because the car was already heavy with all the stuff that we put inside of it. And then because SUVs are top heavy, you don't want to put a bunch of heavy stuff on the roof of the car on top of all of that, that just is going to make turning dangerous. It's not a good idea. So we took all of that in mind when packing, and we are constantly readjusting, learning, and all of that. And even though this convention did end up being disappointing, we did chalk this up to being a big learning experience for so many different things that we did for the first time for this event. So RaptorCon is a sci-fi geek comic book style convention in Evansville, Indiana. Apparently this was their first year at the particular convention hall that they did the event at. It was a nice convention hall. It was pretty sizable. It had a nice skywalk that led to our hotel. I made sure that I got the hotel that was attached to the convention so that it was easy for us to get back and forth. However, unfortunately, there were some issues with the convention itself that made things difficult and ultimately chalked up to us having, y'all are not gonna believe this, 0 sales. 0. So let's get into that. We thought that this convention would be a good idea because we want to increase our radius for the conventions that we go to, meaning that we want to expand the locations that we go to. We want to expand the events that we go to because honestly, convention life gets pretty incestuous, meaning that you just keep seeing the same people at all of the events over and over again. And we've ultimately run into the problem of everyone has bought our books. We see all the same people and they're great and we love them and we appreciate that y'all are our fans and that y'all buy our books and our tabletop gaming games and all of that stuff. But at the end of the day, we have to keep expanding our audience in order to continue to make new sales. So that was the big goal with this, and this is going to continue to be our goal in 2025, is to find new conventions that we can add to our con circuit so that we can continue to grow that audience. And so going so far afield, nearly 6 hours away, seemed perfect. And while we were there, we did accomplish that in that we actually did not see anyone there that we knew, and we did meet some new friends, vendors at the event, so that was awesome. So that goal was ultimately achieved. We also wanted to do a little bit of a different kind of event with that this had more of a sci-fi comic book slant because honestly, you never know. Sometimes audiences will surprise you with who is interested in what. And the biggest linchpin for why we thought this convention was a good idea is that they advertised that they were going to have a bunch of celebrities at the event doing signings. So they had this whole thing for attendees where you could could pay to get like autographs and pictures and stuff with these different celebrities. And then they also had like a VIP package where it offered you early access to the vendor hall, and it gave you like more special privileges with the celebrities. And then there were also a ton of events at the convention. They had like laser tag, for goodness sake, never seen that before. And they had a bunch of like crafting activities and other stuff. They didn't have traditional panels, but they did have like a lot of stuff for people to do, which I've noticed in the past conventions that don't have panels and don't have stuff for people to do typically don't really draw people in, because if all you have is just tables for people to game at and just random vendors, you're not going to get as great of a turnout. You need things for the attendees to do. And so we think it was a combination of the celebrities at the event as well as the location itself is why this event just did not pan out for us. And not just us, it was other vendors at the convention as well. From what we heard of our booth neighbors and just the general grumblings of other people in the hall, most people at the con didn't make a lot of sales, if any. People just were not spending money in the vendor hall at the events. As we watched people walk around, we really did not see a whole lot of transactions happening, which was incredibly bizarre for the massive turnout that this event had. There were well over 1,000 people that came to this event, so definitely plenty of audience, but unfortunately people were not willing to open their wallets. And that was partially due to the celebrities, is that essentially all the attendees spent all of their money on the fee to get into the convention, so the badge fee, and then spent all of their money on all of these perks with the celebrities. And there were like a list of celebrities, and I'm honestly the last person to ask about celebrities. Most of the time when people say some famous person at me, I'm like, I have no idea who that is. I'm really bad with all of that celebrity culture stuff. From what Neal told me, it was, I'm probably going to say the wrong name, but I'm gonna do my best. Tim Cummings, the guy that plays like all the Disney voices, so like Winnie the Pooh and like, you know, all the old Disney movies, like he does all the voices for those. So he was there, and there were a couple of pro wrestlers that were there. One of them was Kane, I believe, and then there was, I think, an actor from the Hocus Pocus movie, and there were like some other people there too. And it was kind of like this guessing game of the different celebrities that were there, because we noticed a theme that there were a lot of cosplays that people were doing, and we found out it was specifically because of the celebrities that were there. So there were people like cosplaying as like different wrestlers, there were people cosplaying as the different Winnie the Pooh characters, there were a lot of people cosplaying as the Sanderson sisters, just all of that. Unfortunately, we did get a lot of people who came up to our booth and told us that they liked our stuff, but they had spent all of their money just going to the event and doing the celebrity signings, so they just didn't have any money left over to do any shopping. As well as the bulk of the people that were there only for the celebrities, and then they just kind of wandered into the vendor hall because that was a thing to do. And it was very clear by just their behavior and their honestly bewildered faces that they really hadn't been to a traditional geek convention before, and they were just very confused, very overwhelmed. Like, it was clear they didn't know what to do, they didn't know how to behave. And by that I don't mean that anybody like misbehaved, but it was clear that there was like a cultural disconnect, that they were like, we don't know what the rules are, we don't know how to convention kind of thing. So people just kind of wandered around bewildered looking at stuff. I was also pleasantly surprised by the amount of kids that were also at the convention, specifically, like, we're talking from about, 13 to like 18 years old. And it was very clear that they were a part of, con culture, geek culture, and a lot of them were displaying that they were part of the LGBTQ community too, which was awesome and surprising considering the area that we were in is extremely conservative. So that was really nice to see. And it was very clear that they, asked their parents to take them to the convention. And so we had a lot of these really excited preteens and teenagers coming up to our booth and very excited about my cosplays. And their parents just had no idea what was going on. It was very clear that they were just there to chaperone, that they were there for their kids, which is so awesome and so sweet to see. So many parents that were there that were clearly so out of their element, but they were really supportive anyway. So that was a really awesome positive thing that Neal and I did notice at the convention, and it was just very refreshing. A ton of people came up to our booth and asked to take pictures with me, which, is totally fine and expected, especially because that's kind of the whole point of my cosplay, is to attract people to the booth, which means people are going to ask for pictures. But it just felt more like people thought that they were like kind of at Disneyland. Also, dealing with people who came to an event that just don't have money was also kind of a weird thing. I mean, traditionally, of course, there are all kinds of people at conventions. There are the people that go on a shoestring budget, and then there's people that go and get, the presidential suite and just throw money like, there's no tomorrow. But at this event, it was just the overwhelming majority of people just did not have money to spend, or at least did not have money they were willing to spend. So that's what ultimately led us to not making sales, is that people were there just for the celebrities. They weren't there for any of the like geek culture stuff. The vast majority of people that were there just don't read books, was the other part of it. It was very clear that these are people that don't exactly read books in their free time. They just have different hobbies and different priorities, and books are not it. And also, I was shocked at the amount of people. This was really the only thing that was even remotely close to bad behavior at the event, was the amount of people that came up to our booth and loudly declared, "I don't read." That was a little bit shocking, to say the least, that people just don't have any sort of decorum or manners to just loudly announce that, which is incredibly rude. Stuff happens. Conventions bring out the weird in people. We took it in stride. It was just kind of like, okay, well, that's what we have here, so figure it out. And unfortunately, the handful of people who were interested in our books, that picked them up, looked at them, read them over, that seemed genuinely interested, then sheepishly let us know they didn't have any money to be able to buy the books. But what was nice was those people did take business cards to potentially buy books later, or at least check out our free stuff that we have on our YouTube channels and online and stuff. So just overall, so many opportunities lost, so many just, missed connections, all of that. We definitely won't be doing this convention again, and it's not just because we didn't make any sales. That's not necessarily a reason to completely write off a convention getting no sales, because sometimes that's just how it goes. Sometimes there are conventions that you just don't get very many sales or none at all, but then the next year you go and you make absolute bank. It's just the flow of things. Sometimes things happen. It's also, we've noticed things still have not recovered since the pandemic. People still, in 2024, are still not spending money the same that they were back in 2019. So that's also part of it too, to keep in mind, is that just because you don't make the sales that you want to make at an event, that doesn't necessarily make it a bad event. Places are still recovering, people are still recovering, as well as some years are just off years for whatever reason. Check out my video about us going to Worldcon and just how that was an entire disaster, and how normally that event is an event you absolutely make bank at, and that event was nothing short of a disaster for the two of us as well as several other people. But at this event, the big reason, in addition to making zero sales, that we won't be coming back is the organization for the event. So the people that owns the event and handled organizing the event is one of the big factors in why we won't be doing this convention again. And honestly, it's because of the lack of organization. So again, I had high hopes for this convention because, they managed to somehow rope in these celebrities to do these appearances and all that kind of stuff. And they had a lot of great advertising on Facebook with like all these different banners and posters about the event, getting people excited about it and all that. And so I thought, this should be really well organized. They seem on the ball, because there are other events that I've done in the past where they make only like one general text announcement on social media and then that's it for the event, and they do absolutely like no marketing or publicity in order to get people to know about the event, know that it's happening, get people excited about it, get people to attend the event. Like, I've been to those where they just absolutely do no advertising. So this one did a lot of good advertising, but when we got to the actual event, there was no organization. So mind you, we did get there late on Friday because, again, nearly 6-hour drive. And load-in was, and that was the other odd thing about this event. It was only Saturday and Sunday. They had all day Friday as the load-in for the event. So normally weekend events like this, you have load-in on Thursday. And then you have Friday, Saturday, and Sunday are the event. So that was kind of weird. But again, we took it in stride and it worked out fine for us because we had to drive for so long just to get there that we only ended up having an hour and a half to do setup on Friday with the drive and then all the shenanigans that ensued. So I don't know if they were there earlier in the day, but the fact of the matter is the organizer did not stick around. They relied on the convention hall staff to help the vendors. So they had apparently several loading docks, but they were only really managing one of them. So all the vendors were just kind of crowding into that one loading dock. And they only had like 3 or 4 volunteers. Whether they were volunteers or they were like the staff for the convention hall, I'm not entirely sure. But it was very clear that they were like, we only handle the load-in. The like outside load-in, and that's it. They were handling the cars that were in the loading dock, and they were handling running the service elevator. So we were not allowed to go through the convention hall or hotel proper. We had to go in through the back loading dock, which meant that we had to use one of those big industrial elevators. And they had a person that had to man it, because it was the one where you have to like manually shut the elevator doors and then manually make the elevator go up and down. And it was great to have that we didn't have to manage that ourselves. But it was pretty much once we got into the actual convention hall, it was everyone for themselves. There was nobody there to direct us. We had to just go find our table, which that was the positive, that with promoting the convention, they did give the vendors a map of the convention hall with all of the tables marked. So everybody got a table number, and then your number was marked on the map. So we vaguely knew where our table was, and we were able to find it. And then, of course, there was the traditional piece of paper printed out with our booth number and name on it. So we were able to find it, but there was nobody directing anybody. There was nobody making sure that like order was kept. There was nobody there to like help with anything, which was just bonkers to me. I have literally never done an event where the event organizers did not actually have any organizers organizing the event. And of course, because of that, chaos ensued. So to start with, because there was no organizers on hand to help, and they also had no good contact information, we ended up going to the wrong building. So there were 2 different convention buildings, and I thought we were in the wrong one. And that was the other thing, was that the email that had the information for like the hotel and the vendor hall and all that was very vague. They did not give clear instructions on where the loading docks were, or what to expect, or which convention hall it was in, or that there were even 2, or anything like that. So we wasted about over an hour trying to figure out just how to get into the vendor hall with no one to contact. So that was really stupid and frustrating. And then once we found the correct vendor hall and, just the giant free-for-all, one of the things they specified in their email was they're like, hey, if you are bringing your own table and chairs, let us know, because if you don't tell us, once the table and chairs are in your booth space, they have to stay there because of union rules with the convention or blah, 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 whatever. And I specifically emailed them, right when I received the email, making sure, hey, we bring our own setup. We don't need any of this stuff. Please don't put it in our booth space. When we showed up, what was in our booth space? A bunch of random tables and chairs that we did not need at all. And not only that, they were the skinniest little tables I've ever seen in my life. I think they were like 6 foot by 1 foot. And I was like, how do you put anything on this? Just absolutely ridiculous. So, we were just like, well, I did my due diligence and I specified we don't need this. So we just picked them up and put them somewhere else. And that's what so many of the other vendors were doing too, because apparently they just gave everyone tables and chairs, that the email didn't matter. And so people were just like, we bring our own setup. We don't need this. So then there were also just random tables and chairs in the way that people were playing musical chairs with, trying to just get it out of the way. And so then on top of it, there was like no aisle space. Just people's stuff was in the aisles. All these random tables and chairs were in the aisles. And it was just craziness. And everybody was clearly very frustrated and very tired. And it was a very disorganized load-in. And I was just shocked that the entire time we did not have anybody there to, even at the very least, check to make sure that nobody had, lost their minds and gone Thunderdome battle or anything like that. And we were so exhausted by the time that we finished setup that we just went back to our hotel room and ordered some dinner and then just absolutely crashed. We were exhausted. And technically the convention hadn't even started yet. So that was a learning experience for us, that with making that long of a drive and having to go directly into setup, and with a traditional convention, if we had driven out on a Friday like that, we would have had to get out way earlier and done setup way earlier, and then the convention itself would have started. So that would have been absolutely crazy for us. So definitely taking the time to better plan how far in advance we decide to drive out versus when load in and first day of the con are, just so that we're not starting off already exhausted before the convention itself even starts. So this was definitely good practice for figuring that out. So Saturday rolled around and I put on my most epic cosplay, because that is what you do at a weekend event, is Saturdays when you put on your most epic, complicated, wonderful cosplay. And this event I decided to be the unicorn fairy princess with all of my finery. It was magical. It was fantastic. I had so much fun putting it together. I got to wear my new unicorn horsehoof shoes by Chaos Costumes. She did a beautiful job designing them. They were absolutely perfect. It looked like I had real unicorn hooves. I was so excited. I was living my wildest unicorn dreams, y'all. When I was 5 years old and adults would ask me what I wanted to be when I grew up, if I didn't answer I wanted to be an author, I answered I wanted to be a unicorn. And there are several embarrassing pictures of me as a child dressed up as a unicorn and prancing around on all fours. So I was living my best 5-year-old dreams that day of, yes, I did indeed grow up to be a magical unicorn. 5-year-old me would have been ecstatic. So that was really fun for me. I really enjoyed that. And Neal and I were able to get some really good content from this event. And that's another thing that we're both growing right now, is we are both trying to get our YouTube channels over the finish line to get monetized, as well as I recently got my Instagram monetized, and just learning all the ins and outs of trying to navigate that in order to, honestly, y'all, best make money off of that. I'm not going to sit here and pretend oh, I just do it for the art or whatever. No, there are certain videos that I do explicitly in order to try and bank on that monetization and make money and get views and all that. Like, at the end of the day, y'all, this is a business. And that's a thing that people can forget, is that passion is not a good replacement for a good business plan. Neal wrote a fantastic article titled exactly that. In that, as a creative person, if you want to do this for a living, or at the very least make enough money to outweigh all the costs of doing these conventions and all that kind of stuff, you have to have a good business plan. You have to recognize that at the end of the day, this is a business and you have to run it like a business. And so that's a big part of our goals, is just getting better at figuring out how to better business with all of that. And a big part of that is our social media strategy. And speaking of social media strategy, that is also part of what I was rather bemused and shocked about with the organization of this event, is that I mean, it does not surprise me, but also, like, it did not help with our feelings about this convention, that all of my posts for this convention got more attention than the official posts that the event organizers did for the convention. So we actually had several people specifically come up to our booth, which we thought was weird, because we're like, y'all have made it very clear that you're not here for books, so why are you going out of your way to come find our booth? Like, it wasn't just people just walking past and being like, oh my god, there's a unicorn person, amazing. Like, it was like, no, people were like on a mission to find our booth, and they were like, oh my god, it's you. And we're like, what is happening? And it turns out people thought that the posts that I was making for the convention, they thought it was the official event posts. They thought the event was advertising me. And I went on social media and I found that all of my posts for the event were trending higher than the posts for the event itself, which was absolutely bonkers. And that just goes to show that, like, while they did do a really good job of advertising to get people in the door, they really did not do that great of a job advertising the event itself. And a big part of that is because, honestly, I don't really know what the event organizers were doing during the actual event itself. You know, maybe they were helping with the actual activities, you know, like, I don't know. We were in the event hall the whole time. You know, we were in the vendor hall the whole time. So, you know, I don't know where they were. It was a whole convention hall with other stuff going on, so who knows. But the fact that, like, they only came in the vendor hall once, and not only that they only had like 3 or 4 people that I saw that were managing this. So that's definitely not enough people to be keeping eyes on stuff. So the fact that they only came into the vendor hall once, and then I don't even know what they were doing to manage all of the other moving parts of this event with all the different activities, with the different celebrity stuff. There was even a completely separate artist alley area. Like, I don't know. So, you know, and I don't know how those other areas were run. So if y'all were at the convention, you know, if y'all were doing the events, if y'all were in the artist alley, like, leave comments below. Let me know, like, what your experience was and all that. I'm curious to know. But yeah, it was just very weird that it was very laissez-faire. It was very hands-off from what we experienced in the vendor hall. And the fact that it wasn't even to check on the vendors or to see if anybody needed anything, or, you know, if, you know, we weren't burning the place down and tearing each other apart. It was literally, he just kind of ran in without informing anybody and just started sticking his camera phone in people's faces, doing a live stream of the event to encourage more people to come to the event. And while, yes, I highly encourage, if you are organizing an event, absolutely have media people come in and cover the events and show off the vendors and show off the activities. That is classic 101, do that. But just the fact that he did it without informing anybody that he was doing it and didn't give anybody, like, any, you know, sort of preamble to be like, okay, you know, we're gonna make sure that we're not, like, you know, eating a snack or picking our noses or, you know, whatever. It was just kind of like, hello, I'm gonna talk really loud and really fast and put this camera phone in your face and oh my god, and move on to the next booth. Like, literally, he was at each booth for like 5 seconds. It was absolute madness. It was just like, oh, holy crap, okay, bye. And, you know, the only reason why we were prepared for it is we saw him like 2 booths down doing this, and we're like, oh, he's doing something. He's got a phone out. Okay, let's be prepared and not look caught off guard. And the fact that he didn't ask the vendors about anything, like, he didn't ask ask any of the vendors, like, hey, what's your booth about? What are you selling? You know, he didn't have anybody actually talk to the camera either. He just kind of was shouting the whole time very loudly and just kind of shoving the camera phone at stuff and then running off to the next booth was just very jarring, and it just made you kind of feel like, how does the audience viewing this live stream have any time to process what they're looking at and what this event is about? So yeah, that also was another nail in the coffin for us, that it just seemed very chaotic. And yeah, as I explained previously, you know, there were a ton of people at the actual event, over 1,000 people from what we saw. And there were a lot of people in the vendor hall wandering around, but really no purchases being made. And people really didn't stick around to talk to us either. It was very much like the people that did come by our booth, it was very clear they did not want to be talked to. And that's okay. Like, we definitely at events have plenty of that where people make it clear they don't want to be talked to, and that's okay. But just that it was the majority of people just had very much the look of, oh my God, don't talk to me, was just kind of like, okay, something's off here, which, you know, again, felt very much the people who just don't know how to convention. So the fact that we couldn't even network and like make connections with people, which is a big reason why we do this in the first place, is it's not just for the direct sales, it's for making those relationships that encourage people not just to buy one book, but to become fans of our work and want to continue buying stuff in the future. So yeah, kind of defeated the purpose, that big purpose of why we go to these in-person events. And yeah, so that was another part of it. And the fact that, like, as the day went on, it just became very clear that we weren't going to make any sales, and it just, you start to get disappointed, you know, that kind of starts settling in, and you're just like, okay. And by the time Sunday rolled around, like, it just felt so pessimistic. It just became very clear people were not going to buy things, and vendors started to feel like, why are we here? Like, you could tell people were fidgeting a lot, people were getting impatient, you could just tell people were like, why are we here? Why are we doing this? And I was getting very impatient. Like, by the end of Saturday, I was honestly starting to lose my mind, and I haven't had an ADHD meltdown that bad in a while, where I just start making very weird noises and fidgeting and just not being able to be people while in public. It was not great, not my finest hour. And Sunday, it wasn't much better, to be honest, because it was just so clear that it was a wash, that it was like, all right, we're not getting anything out of this convention. And it was very much the why are we here, which was very clear with Sunday. Everybody packed up early. Everybody packed up like an hour early. Everybody was so done. They were just like, yep, we're done. Bye. So we packed up too, because, you know, once the hall has decided we're packing up, you best pack up too. And I've learned that from experience. Like, don't stick around waiting until the 11th hour, because once the majority of the vendors in the hall start packing up, people are not going to make significant sales with you. The attendees will just leave, because, you know, they see a bunch of people packing up and they're like, oh, I guess we're done. I guess I should get out of here. People don't want to be rude, or, you know, they don't want to be where they're not supposed to be. So people will just leave. And like, the only like while people are packing up sales that I've made have been other vendors who are like, okay, now I'm free to go and buy the things that I've been eyeing the whole convention. But a lot of times they'll also let you know, like, they'll like come up to you at some point during the convention and be like, hey, I want, you know, when it's loadout, can I come by and shop? Or they'll even specifically be like, hey, can you set this, that, and the other aside for me, because I want to buy it at end of day. None of that happened. None of that happened. Everybody was like getting out of there like their pants were on fire. So, you know, we had to be like, all right, it was, you know, 90 miles an hour loadout, because everyone was frustrated. Everyone wanted to leave. It was pretty crazy, y'all. And loadout was a whole tornado of crazy. But backing up a little bit with the actual Saturday and Sunday convention itself, some of the other positives that we did have for this event, which kind of had nothing to do with the event and had more to do with our social media strategy and all that, is that I've been expanding with my equipment to be able to like record stuff and capture footage and just try to prepare in order to get all this content that we need to get in order to talk about the event, like this video that I'm doing with y'all right now, and as well as all the other posts and videos and clips and things that we did for Instagram and Facebook and all that stuff. preparing for all of that and the fact that now I have 2 cameras, but unfortunately from the Marie Antoinette photo shoot, because it was literally over 90 degrees outside, I think one of the cameras is broken. I think it overheated to the point where it's broken because it just does not want to record properly. So I've had to go and buy a 3rd camera just so I can have 2 cameras now so that I can get those 2 camera perspectives that I really wanted to get for this event in the first place. But just learning that and making sure I had enough batteries and enough memory cards and all of that, and then remembering to charge everything each day, just all of that was a big learning experience for me. There was some content footage ideas that I forgot to get, which, you know, that's another thing that I've learned is that I'm just going to have to make an actual shot list for myself so that I remember the different things that I want to make sure that I get, and so that Neal can be better prepared to help me as well. But one of the equipment items that I got that I'm really excited about that really worked really well was this little like phone stand thing. I don't really know how to describe it. I'll put an affiliate link for y'all in the description. But basically it's primarily for like crafting, where when you put your phone in it, it has a backlight, which is really nice so that your stuff can be well lit. And then the way that the tripod on it works is that it makes your phone horizontal so that you know, if you're drawing or you're crafting or whatever, you can capture that horizontal overhead view, which is so cool. And I'm going to be using that for my Inktober videos. So yes, y'all, I am going to be attempting Inktober again this year. Fingers crossed. Oh my goodness, pray for me. I'm going to be so busy. But yeah, I'm really excited. And I will admit to y'all, I am going to technically, quote unquote, cheat for Inktober because they already put out the list. And with everything I have to do in my daily life, with my day job and all the other stuff that we do, I literally do not have the capability of doing a drawing every single day. I don't. I've attempted it in the past since 2016. Okay, I've tried. I just don't have that capability, so I am going to be drawing and recording them in batches. When I do have big chunks of time where I can just get anywhere from 1 to like 5 drawings done. So I am going to be putting that disclaimer on the Inktober videos just so that nobody, you know, gets any unrealistic expectations. That's a big thing with y'all is, you know, I always want to present all of my material to be like, this is what real life expectations are. Always question what you see on social media. So much of it is curated, so much of it is fake, so much of it is manufactured. I want y'all to realize that what you see is not necessarily what's going on behind the scenes. So I want to give y'all that upfront honesty that I am going to quote unquote be cheating to do Inktober, but a big part of it is I just want to do the challenge of doing all of the drawings. I want to do the challenge of the 31 drawings itself. How and when I accomplish that is an entirely different goal for me. So I am starting here in September on that, but I will be releasing the videos once per day in October, as is tradition, all of that. So stay tuned for that. But I essentially bought this device for that so that I can have the, you know, webcam recording me so that y'all can see me, but also have the close-up shot of my hands so that you can really see me drawing and all that. And I also have been trying to find a solution for how to set up my camera for getting these shots of me doing my makeup, and I haven't been able to find anything that's really sufficient. Like the last time for the Marie Antoinette shoot, I got these lovely shots of up my nose that I chose to not share with y'all. It was so attractive. And I found that this device was just perfect, absolutely perfect for the shots that I needed for me getting my makeup like this. I was so excited for this, and it worked out perfectly with the angle that I wanted to get in order to get this particular view of me doing my makeup. So this is definitely going to be great for other content stuff in the future. I highly recommend it. It's really well made. Just as a little asterisk aside, I did see this in the reviews that one person put that really helped with my decision making, is a mistake that people do with this particular device is that they don't set up the tripod properly, and then they're upset when the device makes their phone flop over, where, you know, the phone is heavy and it makes the whole tripod just kind of wilt and it doesn't stay. It's because you have to pull the tripod all the way up. So there's like a little bend part in the tripod. You have to pull it up all the way to that point, and there's a specific way that you have to turn. Like you have to actually like turn the tripod so that it locks into place and it won't flop around like that. So keep that in mind when using this device. Do read the reviews in the link that I'm going to put in the description so that you understand how to properly set it up, so that you're not mad at it and like, oh my god, it doesn't work properly, it's flopping all over the place and all that. I will say, depending on how you position your phone or the camera that you put in this, it can make it a little top heavy. So you might have to put something heavy on the bottom part of the tripod to make sure it doesn't tip. So there is that. So just be mindful of that. But if you do center your phone, you won't have that tipping issue. So with the cosplays for this event, this is another learning lesson that I particularly had, especially with events going forward and just with me living my daily life, is that I have come to the realization, which I won't lie, kind of makes me sad, is I have far more costumes than I do places to wear them. And I had this problem with that. There were so many different costumes that I really wanted to wear for this weekend, but we only had 2 days to, do costumes. And I'm very much a person where it's like, aside from the steampunk event where I had a separate outfit that I did change into for the tea party, I try to be a 1 cosplay per day gal because it's just so much work and so much planning that I can't do multiple cosplays in a day. It's just not something that I really care to do. I don't need that added stress for myself. And so the fact that I had like 4 different cosplays I really wanted to wear and only 2 days left me with a really difficult decision. And, ultimately I made it and it was great. And I'm glad that I wore the cosplays that I did. But the fact that there are just so many great cosplays that I either haven't worn yet at all, or I feel like I haven't really worn as much as I would like to, makes me sad. That I'm like, I wish that I had more places to wear these. And while this year, 2024, we really haven't gone to as many events and conventions as we have in the past, is part of it. Part of it is also just that I'm not doing like photo shoots on the regular anymore. I'm not doing events on the regular anymore, which means I have fewer opportunities to do this. And while, yes, I can totally just, dress up in my house and have a lovely time for no reason and whatever, and sometimes I do in fact do that, but part of cosplay and all of that is performative and does to a certain extent require an audience. So there is that. And I do know that once, I do meet my goal of getting my own home and stuff like that, I will be able to do a lot more with my cosplay stuff and being able to create content and all of that. And I am very much looking forward to that. But this is just kind of a right now problem for me, which, I'm sure some people are like, oh no, boo-hoo, poor you. You have too many fun costumes to wear. It's a nice problem to have, but it is a problem nonetheless. And it did make me a little sad that I was like, I have all these great things and nowhere to wear them. That whole kind of thing. So that was a little bit of a struggle for me. I solved that issue and wore the cosplays that I wore. They were magnificent. I had a blast. I ended up not wearing one of the cosplays that I really wanted to wear for Sunday because you have to keep in mind for loadout. You can't wear an epic cosplay while doing loadout. It's just a recipe for disaster. You're likely going to ruin your cosplay. It's going to make loadout so much more miserable and complicated. So I wore one of my less complicated cosplays to do loadout, which ultimately was a very good choice because it was like nearly 90 degrees that day. It was like 87 degrees. It was hot. It was sunny. We were sweating. It was miserable. Everybody at loadout was crazy. I felt so bad for the people that were running the loadout area. Again, it was the same people. So it was just chaos. Everybody was just doing whatever. And that was the other thing, is that I felt that the stress of the event and the urgency of the chaos, we have really gotten loading and unloading down, which especially we did a lot of first time stuff with, the roof cargo and with the way that we pack the car, we have more more stuff than ever that we have to pack. And the fact that we did it as fast as we did, I was very impressed. So I feel like we really nailed that goal of we have a really good system in place for getting all of this stuff taken care of and being able to get in and out in a timely fashion, especially because there are some events where they really don't give you a lot of time for load in and load out. Like there's a very limited amount of time. So the faster you can do it, the better. I mean, you don't want to hurt yourself. You don't want to break things. You don't want to be a menace, but you can't just take your sweet time doing load in and load out. And specifically with load in and load out, I mean the packing and unpacking process. Setting up and breaking down your booth, totally separate. That's not, like, it's technically part of load in and load out, but that's a totally separate part of the process. Load in and load out is specifically the taking all the crap out of your car and then the putting it back in your car and getting into the convention hall and taking it out of the convention hall. That you need to get really fast and really good and really efficient at that, because a lot of times they have a limited amount of time that you have carts available. If you don't have your own cart, if they provide carts at all, there's a limited amount of time that they keep the load in and load out space open. They have a lot of rules typically about how and where and all of that you're allowed to do. So having your system down pat is so crucial. And I feel like we have reached that point where we are just so good at this, y'all. We are so good at getting this down and getting everything in for load in and load out. So we did have some positives that came from this experience, although not directly tied to the event. But Neal and I feel, are just really creating a great strategy together. I'm so excited for the last few events that we do have coming up this year, as well as all of the great events that we're going to be a part of for 2025. We're also on the waiting list for a couple of events, so fingers crossed for those, and we're always keeping an eye out for great events that we can be a part of. If y'all have any suggestions for events that are in the Midwest, please leave them in the comments down below. While we are looking to expand our convention radius, we're not looking to expand it so far as of yet, especially since, we're still getting the hang of doing long travel. Overall, unfortunately, this event was a bust. We won't be doing it again, but that's just how it goes sometimes. So we learned a lot and it was an experience, y'all. And Neal and I always have a good time spending time together regardless of where we are or what we're doing. So that was really nice quality time for us, even if part of it was really frustrating and boring and disappointing, but we always try to make the best go of it that we can. So the next event that we will be attending is the Miskatonic Art Bazaar on October 12th. Really looking forward to that. It's going to be one of the smaller single table events, so we'll see how that goes. I expect it to be very similar to the Pancakes and Booze event. Fingers crossed that we'll get a nice space. I want to thank y'all so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please be sure to give it a like, and if you're new, subscribe. All right, y'all, thank you so much for watching. Take care. Bye-bye.